Hi guys, so today we're going to learn how to knit a cable plaited headband. So the first thing we need to do is cast on 22 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Slip off the first stitch, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 12, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, purl the last one. Slip off the first stitch. So we will purl the knit stitch and knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, then we will knit 3, we'll grab the cable needle, slip off 3 stitches, move them to the front, knit 3, go back to the cable needle, knit 3, knit 3, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, and purl the last one. Slip off the first stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl 12, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, and purl the last one. Slip off the first stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, knit 12, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, purl the last stitch. Slip off the first stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl 12 stitches, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, purl the last stitch. Slip off the first stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, knit 12, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, purl the last stitch. Slip off the first stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl 12, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the last stitch. Slip off the first stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, knit 3, grab the cable needle, slip off 3, move into the front, knit 3, go back to the cable needle, knit 3, knit 3, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, purl the last stitch. Slip off the first stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl 12, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, purl the last stitch. Slip off the first stitch, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, when we get here, we will grab the cable needle, slip off 3 stitches, move them to the back, knit 3, go back to the cable needle, knit the 3 stitches on it, grab the cable needle again, slip off 3 stitches, move them to the front, knit 3, Go back to the cable needle, knit 3, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, and purl the last stitch. Slip off the first stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl 12, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, purl the last stitch. Slip off the first stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, knit 12, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, purl the last stitch. Slip off the first stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl 12 stitches, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, purl the last stitch. Slip off the first stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, knit 12, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, purl the last stitch. Slip off the first stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl 12, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, purl the last stitch. Slip off the first stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, slip off 3 stitches, move them to the front, knit 3, go back to the cable needle, knit 3, slip off 3 stitches, move them to the back, knit 3, Go back to the cable needle, knit 3, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, purl the last stitch. Slip off the first stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl 12, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, purl the last stitch. Slip off the first stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, knit 3, grab the cable needle, slip off 3 stitches, move them to the front, knit 3, go back to the cable needle, knit 3, knit 3, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, purl the last stitch. Slip off the first stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl 12, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, purl the last stitch. Slip off the first stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, knit 12, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, purl the last stitch. Slip off the first stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl 12, purl 12, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, purl the last stitch. Slip off the first stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, knit 12, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, purl the last stitch. Slip off the first stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl 12, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, purl the last stitch. Slip off the first stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, knit 3, grab the cable needle, slip off 3 stitches, move them to the front, knit 3, go back to the cable needle, knit 3, knit 3, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, knit the purl stitch, purl the knit stitch, purl the last stitch. Okay, so this is how the headband looks like so far. Please keep repeating the same steps until you've made the headband long enough, and then I'll show you what to do next. Okay guys, so after we've made the headband long enough, now it's time to finish it. So we will purl the first 2 stitches together each time for the entire row. So purl 2 together, purl 2 together again, okay guys, and when we're left with 1 stitch, we will expand it and we will put our work through it. And we will pull the yarn, and that's how it looks like when it's finished. So the next step is to sew the ends together. So we'll take a tapestry needle, put the yarn through the needle, and we will sew the beginning and the end together. So this is how it looks like when it's finished. So after we're done with that, we need to cut the yarn here. That's the working yarn, and this is the yarn we used to sew the ends together, and then we will lose the ends. This is how the finished headband looks like. I hope you guys like it. Please share and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching.